Okay, I'm alive and on the air. Um, I am live. My live button just came on, so I'm live and on the air. I wanted to record the exact details of the events that took place before, during, and after the new moon sighting in Jerusalem on September the 2nd, Friday night at 7:30 p.m. And I want to give you my facts around those events because these facts were my life that I lived, and no one can give my testimony except for myself. So before, you should know, for almost a year now, that I have been observing the new moon on a monthly basis from the Galilee in Israel. I was part of Nehemiah's group and Devorah's group. Devorah. What? What? I'm sorry. I'm getting coached. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm just going to continue. So I was part of Nehemiah and Devorah Gordon's group that reports on a Facebook book page about these sightings. I'm going to shut the door so I can't hear anybody because it's distracting. I lose my place. Thank you. So I was part of their group, and we did report every month to Facebook about the observance of the moon, if it happened, if there was cloud cover, if nobody could see it, if one person saw it, if just whatever happened, it was reported. But I have been a part of a group in Israel from all over the land of Israel that does record and supply photographically and supply time and location and our name to Nehemiah and Devorah, and so that they can then release it to whoever they release it to all over the world. So earlier in the year, I was approached by some people I have made friends with about going to Jerusalem in the 7th month to see if we will be able to see the moon on September the 2nd. These people sponsored me. By sponsored, I mean that they paid for our place to stay. We paid all of our other expenses. They simply provided us the place to stay. So we did agree to do this. And in addition to agreeing to do this, I was very excited because I had been really desiring to see the city of David. And I wanted to see if what I had studied and learned biblically and in ancient historical texts lined up with what I had learned. So this was a big answer to prayer for me, that I actually was, besides getting to go to Jerusalem, I was going to go see the city of David. I had plans on seeing the museums, which I did not do. Time would not allow. The old body was fatigued and strength would not allow. So it was a plus. Plus, the week after we got back, on the 8th of September, like so, 6 days later, I did start my Hebrew studies in Ulpan, Hebrew language. So this was going to be like our last hurrah before I knuckled down for 5 months and studied Hebrew that my husband and I had this weekend away. There were other people that my husband had met on the internet that had arrived in Jerusalem and were going to be there for the weekend, wanted to say hi, get to meet us. So it was just like, yeah, we'll do it. This is going to be great for them, for us, for everybody. It's going to be experience for all the way around. We were doing something for someone, and we were getting to do other things. We were getting to meet people. So it was just good, 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 good. So we didn't drive to Jerusalem until, oh, by the way, I should also say that many of my photos I provided to Nehemiah. If you go through his material that he's posted concerning the new moon sightings, you will probably see from Priya Elite my name and some of my photos. I'm sure that they're still up there. I don't think he's been so diligent to take everything down. So now, we left for Jerusalem on the morning of September the 2nd. And we did drive to Jerusalem, which probably for a lot of Israelis normally isn't a big deal. For this person, it was the first time, and I personally drove, the first time I had driven all the way into the city of Jerusalem. We did use WAS and found our location without problem. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Found our location without trouble. Got the suitcases carried up to our room. It was a bed and breakfast. There were no amenities. Won't go into the details, but it was quite a burdensome physically on me to carry the suitcases into our location. So I was already pretty much exhausted before the sun had set. Now, my husband agreed to meet the couple, and I've already used their names before, so I'm going to go ahead and use it again. It would be Jean and Cassandra Conroy and Chuck. I can't remember Chuck's last name. Please forgive me, Chuck. We had agreed to meet them. Now, this was the first time we'd ever met them. We'd never met them in person before. And I explained to my husband that while it was fine, they could come to the room and meet us, that he needed to understand and they needed to understand that before the sunset, that I needed to try and find a location where I could see the moon from, and that I would be excusing myself to go do that, attempt to do that event. I will backtrack in a second, but let me say that when we met Cassandra, Jean, and Chuck, that I had said in passing, would you like to accompany me, any of you, to go do this sighting? And Cassandra, or Cassie, was very interested and eager to go. So we decided we would go together. And we left off on foot, and I was fatigued, and my walking map kept flipping itself and orienting itself north, and I kept getting it turned around because I was so fatigued. So we would keep getting lost. Now, I need to tell you before I tell you how we got there that this was only my second trip to Jerusalem. I had really no experience in this part of Jerusalem that I was in. When we arrived in Jerusalem, after we landed in Tel Aviv, when we moved here, we stayed in the city center. And it really isn't that far away from the city center, I don't think, from when I was walking around a little bit and kind of getting my bearings. It wasn't really far away, but it was in a completely different area that I had never been in. So I didn't know where I should go to try to see this moon sighting. I had determined before we went to Jerusalem, well, if nothing else, I will go to the Knesset. And I know that in the past, Nehemiah Gordon has done moon sightings from the raised foundation or platform that the Knesset does sit on. So I was doing this from, my idea was to go to do it there. And if I saw Nehemiah, great. I mean, there's no foul. There's no reason two people can't see it. I was hired to report it to a specific, or not hired, I was requested to report it. And no money changed hands. Let me make that clear. I was not hired. They paid for my B&B. That is all. To report it back to the group. And I'm going to give you the group's name. Brian and Linda Convery of abibofgod.com. ABIB of OV God GOD.com. Again, they had previously used on the sightings from Jerusalem, Roy, and we'll get into why in a little bit. So there would be no foul for me to be on or beside the Kinneret, beside Nehemiah, because I would send to him the statistics no matter where I saw it from, which was normally in the Galilee, and he would be there. And I thought, well, it'd be nice. We'll finally meet in person. We'll each do our thing, you know, it'll be no big deal. So I got down there and we did not have access to the platform. The guard would not let us up there, or the grounds of the Knesset. And so Cassandra and I left. We took a taxi there because I kept getting so turned around. I knew if we could get the taxi to the location that it would be easier to follow those roads back to the B&B. And because of my state of fatigue, I just simply, and the silly map in my smartphone kept finding true north again every time we turn a corner. I just couldn't find it anymore. Time was running out. I was feeling pressed. I was feeling stressed. I was feeling tired. We simply needed to get to our location, and we did take a taxi. So when we couldn't access the site that I had in mind, we walked up the hill about a block, and we could see that there was really no elevation there that we could see to the sunset. Okay, we could see, but I needed a clear line of vision to the horizon, unobstructed by anything tall to the horizon. So we walked down the hill and it was no better. And when we come back from down the hill, just about at the end of the block there, so we could see on the other side of the Knesset, because it's a big structure and you can't see around it unless you walk to the ends of both sides of it. And I can't give you the street because I don't know Jerusalem, but it was the main street. On one side past it was a big shopping center. On the other end, I could see a hotel in the business, and in the distance towards the horizon that the sun set in. From that orientation, if I looked to my right, I could see another hotel up on the knoll where we ended up choosing. There was another hotel up there, and then there was a government building. And I did take photos of these, of where I was. Cassie took videos. A lot of times was, you know, she just did it. I wasn't asked, but that's okay. I don't mind, because you know what? I'm happy at this point she did, because the testimony of Jehovah has been called into question. Okay? That should never happen. Okay, okay, let's just drop that aside. Okay, so I'm glad we have this now available to us. So we did choose the knoll. That would be, let me get my bearings, would be across the main street, across the big main street from the Knesset. There was a site across that corner that was under construction that had been, looked to me maybe even like it had been filled up to make a height, and it was higher by, I would say it was 50% as tall as the building itself of the Knesset. So it was even higher than if we had been able to access the Knesset grounds itself. So we trudged up that little hill, and I set up a tripod that I have had for a long time that went with a camcorder I have. I attached my little palm-sized camera that I have to the tripod, and I had my binoculars. And all of this I knew to do because I have been reading and I have been doing this with other people for a year now. I've heard Roy talk about using his binoculars to pre-sight the moon before its actual appearing, so he knows exactly where to focus his attention before he sees it with the naked eye. Nehemiah has said the same thing. In fact, he personally told me that he forgot his binoculars at home this night. So what I am telling you is not unusual that I would have these elements with me. Indeed, if you know my personality, I'm thorough and I'm diligent. If you have asked me to do something on pain of personal loss, I try to always keep my word of what I promise you I will take the responsibility of. Okay, and I have a lot of people who can tell you that that's true about me. It's just the way I'm geared. My word that I give you that I will do something represents the God that I serve. And if I say it, I don't take it lightly. Okay? So I did everything that I could to prepare ahead of time for this September 2nd viewing in Jerusalem. That little camera, it was fairly new to me. I had even taken it out for photos of the conjunction of the Bethlehem star. I had taken it out the previous new moon and supplied Nehemiah photos with this same camera from the Galilee from the previous month. So I had done everything I could, and I had used binoculars out there when we were looking at the conjunction of the Bethlehem star. I used binoculars to spot that as well. So I had tried to educate myself on my tools and the use of my tools before I arrived in Jerusalem, so that I would be so that my work would be acceptable, so that I could do my best job. Okay, excuse me, I'm going to take a break. Now, when we set up the camera on this little dirt knoll, there was heavy construction equipment all around us. There was a small container that had been converted into a guard shack. And there were, I believe, 2 men and a boy that were guarding the grounds of this construction area. And we were actually there quite a while before they noticed that we were there. And he did come out to us, and I believe he was from India, the country India. And I explained to him in English that we were there to observe the moon and take a photo. And he said, very good, and shook his head. And, he left. He was fine with it. So we were allowed to stay there. So I did have my binoculars, and I did not start looking right away for the moon, because I understood from everything that had been said about this particular sighting that it was going to be a difficult sighting, a challenging sighting. That's what I understood. So we started watching the horizon as the sun went down, would come down. And of course, this is a mirror image, so don't say, oh, she's putting her finger the wrong way. Well, I'm not, because you've got a mirror image, okay? So as the sun was coming down, okay, it comes down slightly at an angle. It doesn't come, it comes slightly at an angle. It moves across the horizon. As the sun was going down, I gave it about 15 minutes before I used the binoculars to start looking for it, because after a year of doing this, you kind of know the amount of light in the sky that's left from the sun that will obscure what it takes for the moon to show its light forth, because we know the sun is a brighter light than a moon, and that sunlight has to dim to the point that the moon light becomes the night light of the sky, so that it can be seen. So about 15 minutes after what would be deemed sunset, I started taking my binoculars and looking. And again, this was my first sighting in Jerusalem, and I had Roy's diagrams that he provides every month. And everybody in Israel who participates in spotting the new moon uses Roy's diagrams, whether it's Nehemiah and information he provides, or whoever, if they're using information that has been gathered to project where the moon will be sighted, they're using Roy's information, okay? He's the scientist behind this that provides these facts and this data. So again, I had been using Roy's information to watch this on the horizon, measuring how far, you've got, here's your measurements. Fingers, okay, how many, I don't know, fists, okay, hand spans. These are your measurements. And I've been doing this for a year. And I was using those measurements provided to me by, not provided to me, he didn't give them to me personally. I had taken them from his website, okay, to measure where I should be looking. And as the sun was further down, I began taking my binoculars. And again, I am not familiar with Jerusalem, and I am not going to just stare in one fixed position. So I began moving my binoculars like this, side to side, up and down, and circular. And I'm looking, and I'm looking, and I'm looking. And the sun is getting lower, and I had forgotten my sweater back in the B&B. And the wind that was hitting the top of that knoll was blowing our hair straight back, and it was surprisingly cold. I had begun to shiver. And I had told Cassandra about 7:25, more or less. I did not look at my watch, but 7:20 maybe, that I did not think it was the Father's will that we were going to see the moon that night. Okay? But being the person I was, I would stay until a few minutes after the setting of the moon, when I was sure that we absolutely were not going to see it. So I waited and waited, and lo and behold, I'm going like this, and it was the Father, because it was actually a little lower than I had been looking, okay? When the moon's first appearance could be, it's usually a little bit higher. If you're not seeing it because of atmospheric haze, which there was, okay, and it's beginning to go down, okay, you're going to see it a little bit lower. There was atmospheric haze that night in Jerusalem. And I thought, because I could see the haze line, I thought that was going to keep us from seeing the moon. Okay, so when I saw it and it was lower, I said, "Oh, Cassandra, I see it, I see it, I see it." And she's like, where? Honestly, there was a lot of things probably set between us at that point, but I have one goal. I am so excited. I've seen it with the binoculars, and now I have to put those binoculars down. I'm bringing the camera up into position and focusing it basically in that direction of where I saw it with the binoculars. And I'm trying to watch that spot. I praise Jehovah. It was at a specific spot above a tree that I could train my eye on, okay? And I wouldn't have to guess. What am I saying? I'm a landmark person. Basically, unless I know the area well, don't ask me north, south, east, and west. Ask me by what building, by what body of water, of park, of a tree, of a whatever. The Father gave me a tree to focus on so that I could watch a specific area and see if this moon was going to appear or not. Excuse me. So I was aware that Cassandra had her smartphone out and she was trying to take a picture of what I had seen through the binoculars. And she was saying that sometimes with her phone, she could take a picture and do a filter and see after it's filtered something she doesn't see in the photo. But I'm focused. I'm focused at that tree. I've got my camera just with my hands quasi turned up in that direction, and I'm watching that spot, that point above the tree that my Father gave me to watch by. I'm so sorry. So, give me a second. I'm gonna get through this. It's a miracle for me, okay? I'm absolutely nobody. I'm an earthen vessel with a deposit of my Father's Holy Spirit. That's who I am. That's all. So the moon appeared in that point, and then it faded a little bit. And I thought, oh, you know, is it going to come back? Is it haze? Is that it? because there has been a time in the past in this year that Devorah, Gordon, and I were the only ones to see a moon. I don't think she photographed it either. Okay, I tried to photograph that one from the Galilee, and I could not get a photo of it. But I do think Nehemiah was in the States in that month, and I do think that the month went ahead and declared without photographic evidence, because there was Devorah, Gordon, and myself as the only witnesses for Israel. So as soon as the moon did come back, it looked like it was fading, and then it began to get brighter. As soon as it began to get brighter, I bring in my camera up and I'm hitting that zoom. My little camera is about this big, and it's only got a 30x zoom, and I'm zooming it really in close, and I can see it. I can see it coming and going in the focus, because if you know automatic focus, you know, sometimes it has a hard time deciding on what you were taking a picture of. It did not have a touch screen like a smartphone that I could say, this item is what I'm focusing on, which I have in my smartphone, but it wouldn't have been sufficient to capture what I was trying to capture. And I had already practiced with the little camera, and I knew it was a bit better for capturing the moon. So I couldn't choose that with this camera. I had to work with the features of this camera. And I pulled it in, and it would come and go, okay? The focus would blur and sharpen and blur and sharpen. And I just began to take pictures. And I was able to capture 2 separate pictures with that little phone of the moon. Now it's cold. I'm excited with adrenaline. I'm exhausted, and I'm shaking so hard. My whole body feels like a wet noodle. And I'm trying to, with trembling hands, get my camera to act as a Wi-Fi signal hotspot so my smartphone can receive the picture off my camera, so I can put that in an email to Brian and Linda Convery, so I can put it in an email to Nehemiah Gordon and send these photos out immediately to report that Cassandra and I had seen the moon. So we get that done, and we get everything packed up from the top of that little knoll, and we've got about a mile to walk home. This is the Sabbath in Jerusalem. There were Arab taxi drivers along the way. We chose not to use them. I chose not to pay anybody, and I chose just to walk, okay, on the Sabbath. So we begin the walk home. And as before, we actually even had got across out of the block from where the Knesset was, Nehemiah called me on the phone. And I'm recounting all the details, answering all of his questions, answering everything he gave to me. And I explained to him that I had someone with me. And also, I want you to know, before I met Cassandra, I did not know Cassandra, okay? So she is not a witness with an agenda, okay? She was someone the Father provided for me. Because I want to tell you that there was 1 month that Roy Hoffman was the only individual to see the moon and captured it, and they accepted his witness for that month. I believe that was about 3 or 4 months back, okay? Nehemiah is asking me if I have a second witness, and Cassandra's there. And I pass the phone to Cassandra, and she gives Nehemiah the details of what he asks for. So we hang up the phone. We walk back to the hotel, and I'm feeling particularly in awe the further away from I get from that physical location, because the suffering is beginning to be over. I'm walking, I'm warmer, I'm getting to go home. I'm going to lay on that little bed in the bed and breakfast and stretch out and relax for really the first time that day. I'm happy I've done what I was supposed to do. It was successful, and now it was time for me to let down. Got back to the hotel room, and I also had in the journey back to the hotel room or the B&B talked with Brian and Linda. Talked to them again in the hotel room. The next morning was the City of David, and probably because I turned my phone down at the beginning of that tour, I had missed the fact that Nehemiah had been calling me, and Nehemiah called me in the evening after I got back to the hotel, and I had turned my phone back up, and I received his call. I didn't see where he had left me a text or message because I hadn't checked. I was on vacation at that point. And I answered his call, and he says, "You've become very famous." I laughed, "Ha ha ha, I have become famous? Really? I didn't know that." And he said, "Yes." He said, "Roy Hoffman would like to speak to you." He said, "I don't know. I don't remember if no, he didn't. Roy Hoffman would like to speak to you. He has some questions concerning your sighting. Would you be willing to talk to him?" "Sure, Nehemiah, I'll talk to him. I don't have any problem talking to anybody." So he said, "Do you want me to give him, you want his number, or do you want him to call me?" I said, "You can just give him my number. He can call me." He said, "Okay, great." I hung the phone up. Roy called. Roy asked me very specific questions related to the sighting. The only one that I didn't satisfy was, and I've learned this term this year, what direction was the horns facing? This is the direction, okay, the horns were facing. The horns are this part of the crescent moon. Okay, this was something I didn't really become aware of until the last month before I saw the moon. What directions were the horns facing? Never a part of anything I've ever done when I sighted the moon. In the past, as I told you, I take the picture. I recognize the time that I sighted it. I put my name, my location, the picture, and in an email, and I send it to Nehemiah. So when he asked me what direction was the moon facing, I was like, actually what he asked me was, if you're looking at a clock, what numbers on the clock would the moon have covered? And I am not thinking scientifically. At that point, I'm thinking he's asking me how much of a circle, what the size of that moon was, okay? And I said, "Gosh, Roy, I don't know, maybe 11 to 7? He says, "Aren't you giving me the wrong numbers?" And I said, "Well, it's not 12 to 6. It wasn't a and if he's honest and you ask him, he'll tell you this. It wasn't a half circle, a full half circle." I said it was less than a half circle. That is the only question I did not pass muster on. And we'll come back to that question in the telling of this. So I spoke to him about the measurements I took, how I used his diagram and measured it with my fingers, and how low it was at sunset, and where, all of these questions, okay, everything else he was well satisfied with. It was just that very first question I did not understand. So we hung up. In a few days, actually it was the next day, when we drove home to our house from Jerusalem, I was exhausted, just beat from climbing through Hezekiah's tunnel, walking back to the City of David on foot, doing the 3-hour tour in the heat, walking back to the hotel. Then we walked out and had supper, and then back home, and then the drive. I just was had really put forth a lot of effort on my vacation time in Jerusalem. And I was laying in the bedroom here in the house and trying to rest, and I couldn't rest. I kept thinking about Roy's questions and how I felt sufficient or deficient in my observations of what I normally do. You know, like I said, photos were my game, and I never thought to look at the size of the moon, measure in that moment exactly where it was against the horizon. None of those things I hadn't thought to do ever. So rather than lay there sleepless, I picked up the phone and I called Nehemiah. So this was our third conversation from the time that I saw the moon, the night of the moon sighting, the next day when he asked me if I would talk to Roy, and then I called him on our third conversation. And I said, Nehemiah, I said, do you have some time to visit with me? I said, I have some questions. I said, after my visit with Roy, I feel deficient in my qualifications to spot the moon from the questions he asked me. Nehemiah said, very close to exactly, but I'll call it a paraphrase, I think you're doing it perfectly. Well, I think you're doing what you do, your job perfectly. And I do believe he did say your job. I believe you're doing your job perfectly. But what Roy is looking for is what the Mishnah requires. Then Nehemiah told me about a study that was done in the early 1900s of people who observed the moon and give me some information. And he encouraged me to call Roy again and speak with him about that I had misunderstood about the face of the clock and what he was asking me when he asked me for the numbers. He encouraged me a couple of times to do that. And so I thought about it and I thought, well, sure, I'll call him, okay? I did call Roy. Roy did speak to me again. And he did say to me, from his perspective, some of the things that he would like me to be looking for when I observe the moon, which I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem doing it. I'm out there anyway. I'll probably learn some more things that maybe I had not considered. So he did educate me on what he was doing, and I thanked him. Okay, and he himself, to this date of September the 12th, have me as a valid witness that he vetted according to the very strict rules that the Orthodox Jews have in the Mishnah. Okay, I have been vetted and my witness does stand with them. Now, why is that important? Roy Hoffman is the one who originally established the New Moon Society here in Israel, who began the watch on a regular basis of the new moon from Jerusalem. Every month he's out there like the rest of us, and he's very scientific in what he does with measurements, okay? So that he publishes for actually many years in advance. I think he has 3 years, maybe 4 years worth of diagrams on that website of what to look for every month, the distance from the horizon, the distance from the sun, the conjunctions that will appear with the moon, all of that information. He has either 3 or 4 years of that published on his website. So he is the real brains and the scientist. He is a science professor, I believe at the University of Jerusalem, I believe. I could have that wrong. I don't know. But he's the real scientist behind this. Okay. That's why it's important. I can only guess at why Nehemiah would then say that my witness was unreliable. I can't even imagine what evidence he has been provided with, by whom, that could not come from me. Because remember, this is an observer of an atmospheric event. So what evidence after the fact could he have been given to discredit my witness when he accepted it, when he said I did my job perfectly, when Roy Hoffman, who, by the way, Roy told me that it was the Sanhedrin who asked him to verify my witness, when Roy told me that my witness was fine, they published my report. So what possible evidence could he have had that become available to him that would discredit what he said was credible, what he said, what the Sanhedrin would say is credible? I don't know. I can only speculate. But I'm going to sit here right now in front of you and tell you that I have been faithful to witness the things that the Father put in front of my eyes. I did indeed, with my naked eye, see the moon. I did indeed take a photo of that moon. I did indeed see it at 7:30 September the 2nd, near the Knesset in Jerusalem, Israel. I have been honest, and Jehovah, whose witness it ultimately is, I don't think he's going to let this go without recompense, to call his witness, okay? And his witness untrue and unreliable. That's what I wanted to bring you. There's a lot of people running around, why this, why that, why, you know. That's all the facts I have. So thanks for listening.